Namaste everyone, Jai Shri Ram. Today, as part of the Swarohan Samskriti series, I am really happy to announce we have Shri Dr. Ramesh Sistla with us, an eminent scientist, philosopher, and he's also the founder of Think Molecular Technologies, the company. And he also runs an organization called Ramabhakti Samrajyam, which is dedicated to analyzing and interpreting the compositions of Sadguru Sri Tyagaraja. And today he will be talking on Ramayana and Sanatana values. Uh, we all know somewhere, that as part of the Itihasas and Puranas, what an elevated position Ramayana holds in terms of values. And without much ado, I will hand it over to Shri Ramesh, to take over from here and enlighten us with the values, Sanatana values that come from the Ramayana. Over to you, Ramesh. We are very happy you're here with us as part of Swarohan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Narayanji. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
And I hope you can see my slides as well.
Yes, can see the slides as well. Yes.
Excellent. We can start. So, Shri Guru Namaha. आपदामपहर्तारं दातारं सर्वसम्पदां लोकाभिरामं श्रीरामं भूयो भूयो नमाम्यहम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. Paying rich obeisance at the feet of Guru and Lord Sri Rama, I am very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Narayananji and Dinkarji, for having me here and for inviting me to share some thoughts on the Sanatana values. And when you invited me to share the Sanatana values that I thought of, I couldn't actually think beyond Ramayana, because Ramayana happens to be a manual that tells us how to go ahead in terms of observing Sanatana values in our daily life. So it is actually a practice precept by practice actually. So therefore, I thought it is appropriate that we talk about Ramayana today. So before doing this, I want to again, pay my respect to all the gurus who have actually shaped my thinking about this, who continue to shape my thinking, and I am actually much grateful to all of them for this particular grace. So going forward, this is briefly my agenda. I will talk about the basis of Bharat, how we are Vedic civilization, and what exactly Sanatana Dharma wants us to do. What is the operational meaning of that? Then, of course, we'll talk about the Ramayana, the way it is structured, and all that. I'll come to that in a bit. And the importance of language in propagating our culture, and finally I'll top it off with how to have that faith, conviction, and courage in following this. So without much ado, let's step into the basis of Bharat. What you see here in the map is actually the Akhanda Bharat. Maybe a millennia ago, this is how we looked. Okay? Spread pretty widely from east to west and north to south. And what exactly defined this Vedic civilization was not a political identity, but it was actually a civilizational and a cultural identity that actually shaped this particular land. And of course, as when we talk about Vedic civilization, the Vedas themselves are pretty diverse. And primarily we talk about four Vedas: the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda. And what exactly they espouse is that the Vedas command us about the type of life that we should actually lead. The Vedas, they speak like the Lord. Okay, they command. So it is actually very stern command that the Vedas give. They don't mince words. They just give very stern command. So they say is Prabhu Samhitam. Okay, that means they actually speak like a king. So when the king orders, there are no. It's not sweetened or anything, right? So it comes very sternly. The Itihasas and the Puranas, the legend, the Itihasas and the Puranas, they actually speak like a well-wisher. They exemplify. They actually are very kind-hearted, and they say that, hey, look, if you actually don't do this, this is the way it will actually go because this is what happened to such and such person. So that's how they actually exemplify the whole thing. The kavyas, on the other hand, the poems, they actually are kanta samitam. That means they speak like a very well-meaning wife. So there is a beauty to the way it is said, the way it is actually narrated, as well as the way the content of the narration. Both are actually extremely appealing in this particular case. So, however, it has to be kept in mind that the Itihasas, Puranas, and Kavyas, they do not go beyond the realm of what the Veda preaches. In other words, they are actually the operational guidelines of the Veda. So they're actually Vedas in action. Let me put it that way. They're actually the Vedas in action. And what exactly is the purpose of all this? What is the purpose of this vast literary Vangmayam that we are talking about? The vast literary Vangmayam's purpose is the only thing. Their common goal is the upliftment of the individual and through that of the entire humanity. Now, in Sanatana Dharma, primarily every being, every human being, actually aims for Purushartha. Purusharthas are actually the fourfold goals of life. As the name indicates, they are actually the fourfold I said. So there are four of them. The first one is Dharma. Okay. Loosely, we can translate it as right conduct. Dharma has many connotations, and what we talk about religion is not one of them, definitely not. In this context, you can actually loosely say that dharma is right conduct, or in other words, it actually tells you how to actually conduct oneself. Then the next thing is the artha, or the means to achieve something. Artha loosely translates as money, okay? Because today money is a means of achieving many things. It was not so perhaps in the older ages, right? When there was barter system and there was actually active exchange of things between people. So Artha actually more broadly can actually talk about the means. Then the third one, Kama, again, loosely translates as desire, but a broader ambit of it is actually the ambition. Okay, so dharma, artha, kama is anything that we do in our life. They can be categorized under these three categories. Under these three, that action belongs to one of these three categories. Actually, it is either dharma or artha or kama. It could be more than one. So, therefore, this is what we tend to achieve. We actually strive to achieve in our life. So, then what is the fourth one? The fourth one is actually moksha. Moksha, again, the general perception about moksha is that it is something that is attained upon death. Okay, what we call liberation, that the soul is liberated, he got moksha. Now, obviously, if somebody has to attain moksha at the end of the life on earth, they have to lead the life in such a way that the moksha becomes an automatic choice rather than something that is earned at death. So therefore, this is if the dharma, artha, and kama are actually if these threefold goals are properly practiced in the life, how we actually conduct ourselves, how we actually get our means, and what are our ambitions, the right pursuit of these three automatically actually leads to moksha. So I am no expert to talk about the fourfold goals, but the generally all our scriptures actually goad us towards our Purusharthas in life. So this is essentially Sanatana Dharma. Okay, if you have to define it, you have to say that okay, Purusharthas. We need to achieve the fourfold goals of life appropriately. That is what the Sanatana Dharma is all about. And all our rishis, munis, and the kavis, the poets, have been extremely kind in actually carrying, propagating this message from time to time for us in various forms, so that because not one person, not everyone understands the same way. So therefore, they have encapsulated this truth in various different formulations, and extremely kindly they have actually tried to give this to us. So then let us see where are the evidences of our rich culture, okay, that we are talking about. Because essentially it is a personal pursuit. The Purusharthas are a personal pursuit, but everybody need not rediscover the wheel. So everybody actually gets to learn from others and the way they have conducted, the way they have either prospered or got doomed. So therefore, that is the lesson which actually tells us either about how to be or how not to be. So therefore, a large part of our culture is a lot of legends, which have been depicted in a lot of places. And let's talk about that history of ours. So, in the earlier times, the knowledge of the history of the land and its philosophy passed on from one generation to the other through a solid tradition of Gurukula. So, the Sishyas, they went to the Guru and they lived with the Guru for a period of 12 years. And from the Guru, they learned not only the Vedas, but also, the various historical, geographical, psychological aspects of life. Uh, and then gradually what happened, interesting bits of history, they manifested on the temple walls. Okay, so that actually underscored that the wide circulation of the culture and the celebration of valor and faith that we had. So certain temples also showcased other forms of education that was necessary for the society, like the values that were needed to carry on in one's life. They had amusements, they had education, they had history and philosophy. So just let's take a look at some of these. I don't want to belabor this point more, but I thought if you look at this, Ravana is actually trying to lift the Mount Kailash. Okay, so you see this is an inscription. This is a carving on the in the Kailashnath temple in Ellora. Okay, so this picture is when Ravana is actually trying to lift the Mount Kailash. If you look at the right, the next picture, you see it is such a busy picture. Okay? So this was carved by hand, more than about 1500 years back. Okay, and particularly what I have shown here is actually Vali and Sugriva fighting each other. To come a little bit right, this is a picture from Belur, where likely that Arjuna and Bhishma are actually engaged in the battle here, because in the bottom you see Bhishma actually fell on a bed of arrows. And on the right hand side, you see Narsimha, Lord Narsimha, who is one of the 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu, who is actually basically opening up Hiranyakashipu and wearing his intestines as garlands because he was so livid that his devotee Prahlada was brutally ill treated by Hiranyakashipu. So, what it actually signifies is that because temples were public places, and having this kind of the cultural ethos depicted on the temple actually told us that these our history and the associated values were actually prevalent, and in order to educate people about that and also remind people about it, it was actually very widely depicted in a lot of temples. We will find this across Bharat in a lot of. So, in addition to that, there is a large literary tradition. So the oral tradition of the earliest times was supplemented by a thriving literary tradition in due course of the time. So documentation of the conquests, and what did this literary tradition hold? It documented the conquests of various kings, their rules, what are the various conflicts. They were made in an extremely prolific manner. To give you a glimpse of how prolific it was, right now in Pune is situated the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute that contains more than 29,000 manuscripts. These are Indian manuscripts, mostly in Sanskrit, that provide gateways into the Indic history of the land. Okay, so therefore, both the depictions on the temple walls and the written traditions are comparatively recent given the age of our civilization. So, what exactly is the age of the civilization? To give you just a bit of clue, based on certain astronomical events that are actually recorded in the Valmiki Ramayana, there is a gentleman by name Nilesh Oak who you can find on the YouTube and in the internet. He does excellent research, trying to find out when these astronomical events would have occurred, and he tries to actually backdate them. So, based on that, he says that the epic battle between Rama and Ravana is approximated to about 13,000 before Christ. That's about roughly 15,000 years ago. Okay, so considering this to be true, the advanced state of Ayodhya several thousands of years ago is actually simply astonishing, because if you read Valmiki Ramayana, Ayodhya was a very highly evolved state that actually excelled in all spheres of human pursuits. So, therefore, 15,000 years back, this civilization was something. Okay, and there are places that actually not just lived but thrived. Okay, so therefore, that is something. And come to think of it, Ramayana is not the most recent thing, because if you talk about the Rig Veda age, what the history books today talk about, that seems to be about 22,000 years ago. Okay, when perhaps most of the world lived in the caves. Okay, so that's the time we are talking about. As astonishing is the fact that the narration of Ramayana has been preserved for such a length of time, and it continues to actually thrive. That's actually pretty astonishing. Okay. So, therefore, before I actually go further, there is a dispute among many. I'm sure some of you are already thinking about it. Is Ramayana only 15,000 years? Okay. So we have four yugas: the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga, which is the current yuga. And again, if we look at Shastras, they say the duration of these yugas is said to be about the Satya Yuga is 34 lakh 56,000 years. The Treta Yuga is 17 lakh 28,000 years. The Dwapara Yuga is 8 lakh 64,000 years, and the Kali Yuga is 4 lakh 32,000 years. Okay, so Ramayana, we all know that it actually happened in the Treta Yuga, as documented in the subsequent works like the Bhagavatam, which was actually written in the Dwapara Yuga. So therefore, Ramayana would be dated back to some 8 lakh 50,000 years or so, or more actually. So therefore, taken at face value, the 13,000 years claim is at actually loggerheads with respect to that. So as I said before, Sri Nilesh is a brilliant researcher. You find him on the internet, and there are others also who are actually following. They are trying to actually read our scriptures and then try to address this particular issue of dating of our civilization, because nobody should tell you that we came to existence in 1947, right? So we lived millennia. Millennia is a small word again. Several millennia before that, we not only lived, we actually thrived. So therefore, there has to be an active research by both historians and students of Shastra to bring out this particular aspect from our Shastras and try to date when it happened, and to actually resolve this particular current conflict that is there between this 13,000 years and the 8,64,000 years. So, and the key point is that therefore our manuscripts, they provide evidentiary values and must be critically read and subjected to the scientific principles as we practice today. So it is not something to be brushed aside, saying, "Oh, this is all imagination. Somebody just wrote it." Okay, I mean, how come? How there is? I think that's actually a very poor. In fact, I would say it is a very lazy excuse. Not wanting to do something and then just brushing it aside as mere figments of imagination. Because 29,000 manuscripts actually means something. It's not that everybody was imagining it all the time, right? So, what I want to say is that it's possible that many times there is a reconciliation may not be possible. Then it should be actually stated as such and not brushed aside as imaginary writings. So I am actually reiterating. So now let's come to Ramayana, which is the mainstay of our topic here. After a rather elaborate introduction, I thought that was actually essential to think of it from a historical perspective. So Ramayana, the tradition, okay, it's a thriving tradition. Even today, you find it in many households. There is a devout daily recital of Ramayana in every single day without fail. And people conduct regular Pattabhishekam of Lord Rama in their houses, in public places, and where not. Interestingly, Kerala actually observes the Ramayana month in August, which is the last month of their almanac before Onam actually brings in the new year. And we see up north, we do see the Ram Leela celebrations that portray brilliant episodes from Ramayana in form of excellent plays. In the north again, by Goswami Sri Tulsidas ji, we have the Ramcharitmanas part that goes on in several households, public places, etc., very regularly. And this is an epic originally written by Maharshi Valmiki in Sanskrit language, but subsequently as the new languages evolved, which are actually the daughter languages of Sanskrit and the non-daughter languages of Sanskrit, Ramayana has been written in every single language of Bharat and many foreign languages also. And often you will find more than one version, which doesn't exactly, correspond to the Valmiki's version of Ramayana. But there are many devotional takes of Ramayana by several people that has, over the period of time. In fact, in the language of Telugu alone, there are about 20 different versions of Ramayana, which people have written out of their devotion and researching it from various different angles. So, tribals sing the story of Rama in the dialects. So it's not written. Obviously, the tribal languages, they're close to one of the mainstream languages. So there isn't a lot of written material that you will find. So therefore, I have heard many tribals sing the story of Rama in their own dialects. Okay, so what it actually means is that there is a very strong oral tradition, because it's not somebody going and reading from a book. So there is a very strong oral tradition that still persists in several parts of our country, where people sing the story of Rama in their dialects. And then there is a tradition of reading specific chapters of Ramayana for specific gains, because, as we said, people actually pursue the dharma, artha, and kama, and therefore there are several things that we want in our life, and there is a belief that people are actually motivated by the belief that if I do this, I might get that. So therefore, even that kind of a Sakala Siddhi Ramayanam has also evolved. Okay? So where a daily recital of a certain chapter. Okay. For example, if somebody wants a child in their family, so the Sri Ramajaranam episode is actually the chapter is actually prescribed for them. So therefore, what it talks about is about a thriving tradition of Ramayana in our lives even today, right? And those who cannot actually read the Ramayana, or there are several people I have known who keep on writing the name Sri Ram every day and until a crore and a more. So therefore, there is a rich and thriving tradition of Ramayana. And I don't mean, I'm pretty sure that I have not exhausted I have not listed out every single, uh, you know, every single pursuit of this tradition here. These are just some of them, maybe tip of the iceberg that I have come across in my life so far. So now why? So if there is such a thriving tradition, then there must be a reason. Okay, so why exactly is that so? And I actually think the value proposition that Ramayana actually brings is actually unparalleled. Okay, it pretty much reflects the Vedas in very authentically. So therefore, I think its value proposition is actually what makes it extremely endearing to people. So let's look at what are the various values that actually it brings. The first thing is not a value, but there is an outstanding structuring of the epic itself. I think the way Valmiki envisaged it and he has actually put it, I'm pretty sure that there has to be a Valmiki Puraskar for excellent literature that's actually missing, and I hope sometime very soon there will be one like that. And the internal consistency of a very high degree in writing. So that's an example of great presentation. By this, what I mean is that what you find in one part of the epic, the same sentiment you will find several thousand verses after that also. So that is actually in our contemporary world, if you have to say, it's a very tight screenplay. Okay, so that's an example of great presentation. Um, if you look at the first chapter, there is a glorious guru and the great Sishya, the Vishwamitra and Rama. We will be looking at these values in a little bit more detail in the upcoming slides. So then the tenacity of Vishwamitra is a great value, how he pursued and actually became a Brahmarshi. Then in the second canto, the righteous ruler and the connected citizens, how Dasharatha actually ruled very righteously and how the citizens actually connected with him. And of course, everybody knows about Rama's, giving up of the kingdom and going to exile. So, which means that no cost is actually too much to opt for that. Then we look at excellent fraternal love among the four Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, which is something I think that motivates this country, this land, where the brotherhood is still actually highly celebrated. And I think the great example actually follows from Ramayana. Then we also see in the Ayodhya Kandam itself excellent commitment and devotion to Rama, okay, and commitment to the cause and devotion to Rama. That is again beautifully exemplified in the Ayodhya Kandam. And in Aranya Kandam, Rama actually ensures the protection of the good because he was not in the exile simply because he was banished from the kingdom, but he actually made good of his exile because when he lived there in the Dandaka forests, he actually ensured that all the sages who were actually not being allowed to pursue their righteous dharma, they actually didn't suffer. So he actually protected them. Then, of course, we know about the Sita Apaharan, and on the way, Rama finds Sugriva. He is actually brought it by Kabanda. So the friendship. So Rama and Sugriva actually nurture a great friendship that had they actually exchanged favors, but the friendship was actually rooted in dharma. So that's what we read about in the Kishkinda Kanda. So how to actually keep the friendship up. And then the Sundarakandam, which has a very high value from a ritual perspective and from a uh, for a spiritual sadhaka, actually brings up excellent courage of Hanuman and his clarity of thought in that particular mission Lanka. Then Vibhishana tells us that no relation is actually too intimate to not uphold dharma. So therefore, you can, if you have to actually uphold the dharma, you can give up anything and anyone. So and then the Ramarajya is actually beautifully celebrated, albeit briefly in the last sarga of the Yuddha Kanda. So this is the value proposition again by no means exhaustive. If you dig more, I'm sure you will we will find more. But I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what are the various values that are actually covered here and which are extremely important in our day-to-day life. So let's go into the how the epic is actually structured. The Valmiki Ramayana consists of seven kandams. The first one is the Balakandam, in which Rama is born, and as soon as he is born, and in fact, you will see in the next slide, it is not Valmiki's idea to write everything about the childhood of Rama, how he played with friends, and all this. Okay, you will we will talk about that in a minute. Just hold on that particular thought. But the Balakandam is not much about the childhood of Rama. It is a lot of it has to actually do with Vishwamitra and Rama's interactions and Vishwamitra's story, Maharshi Vishwamitra's story, and how he became the Brahmarshi. Then in the second one, the Ayodhya Kandam, this pie chart actually tells you how big the kandam is in terms of the number of verses. The Bal Kandam is a relatively a small one. Then we have the Ayodhya Kandam, where the citizens sing the glory of Rama, then Rama's exile, and then the devotion of the Ayodhya Vasis, the devotion of Guha, Bharata's advent, and how he actually poo-poos his mother's ambitions and intentions, and he goes on to request, goes on to the forest in order to request Rama to come back. It talks about statecraft, how a king should be. Actually, I'm not talking about it in this particular talk, but there is a certain sarga in the Ayodhya Kandam called Kadrit Sarga, the number 100, sarga number 100, that talks about statecraft, how a king should rule, okay, how the spies should be, what kind of ministers he should have, whom he should listen to, whom he should not listen to, when he should get up, when he should, think about at what time of the day he should do what. So it actually is pretty exhaustive way Rama actually advises Bharata. Then it talks about Dharma and Bharata's. Then Rama goes on, he refuses to budge and come back to Ayodhya. So he actually goes on to the forests, the Dandaka forests, which are roughly in the Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Andhra region today. And he is the protector of the good, and he displays peerless might in that he actually kills 14,000 demons in one shot in a matter of about 72 minutes is what Valmiki writes, and he's actually in the mission mode. So then, after having lost Sita, as she's abducted by Ravana, he goes on searching for her. The fourth kandam, the Kishkinda kandam, actually talks about the friendship with Sugriva and Sugriva's outstanding knowledge of the geography of the world, not just India, the geography of the world. So there is a YouTube video again called Sugriva's Atlas. Please go and find it out. You will be really thrilled about what kind of geography it encompasses. And the Kishkinda Kandam also talks about Hanuman's leadership qualities. And the Sundarakandam actually talks about the quest of a lonely seeker, because Hanuman is all by himself when he crossed the ocean and he went to find Sita. He has absolutely no contact with anyone to check whether he's in the right direction or not, or bounce his ideas. So I mean, we are all lonely as seekers. That's why Sundarakandam holds such a great repository of knowledge and guidance. And the sixth one, the Yuddhakandam, is actually the pretty biggest among all, the pretty terrifying battle, actually, the routing of Ravana. And the seventh one, Uttarakandam, is actually not the flow of the story. It is more like an appendix that actually tries to put in perspective a lot of happenings in the other six kandams. It has, other examples of how Rama ruled and all that, but it's actually a collection of a lot of different stories. Okay. So in all, there are not more than 500 sargas and 24,000 verses about that. There is the structuring of the epic, as I said, the first sarga actually starts with the executive summary, and each chapter is actually pretty modular. Okay? And Maharshi Valmiki actually provides recaps every once in a while because it's a very long epic, and lest the reader is lost as to where he is, what just happened a while ago. He actually provides recaps every once in a while without calling it so. So that is the beauty of it. It actually flows into the story, but then you are provided a beautiful recap of that. Then there is a glorious culmination, of course, of the entire story. And as I already talked about, there is an amazing internal consistency. About this, I won't be talking today, but at some other time we can talk about that. Okay. So I'll be so onwards. I'll be actually presenting certain selected shlokas from Ramayana. I will narrate the context of that and then keep moving on. Okay. So the first sarga which I thought sarga is actually a chapter. The first sarga is the executive summary of Ramayana. It has 100 shlokas, often known as Sankshipta Ramayana, okay, or the Ramayana in brief. So the first slokam of Ramayanam is actually tapaswadhyay niratam tapasvi vagvidamvaram naradam paripapracha valmikirmuni pungavam says. So what it means is the sage Narada actually he roams the world. So he once came to Maharshi Valmiki, who is a tapasvi himself, who is a repository of penance. So a question has been actually haunting Maharshi Valmiki. And that's the question because somebody who has traveled the world obviously knows about a lot of people. So therefore, he is the appropriate person to ask that question. So therefore, he actually asks this question of Maharshi Devarshi Narada. So what he asks is, Onvasmin sampratam loke gunavan kascha viryavan dharmagyascha kritagyascha satyavakyo dृढ़व्रतः चारित्रेण च को युक्तः सर्वभूतेषु को हितः विद्वान् कः समर्थश्च कश्चैकप्रियदर्शनः आत्मवान् को जितक्रोधो द्युतिमान् को न सूयकः कस्य बिभ्यति देवाश्च जातरोषस्य संयुगे. What it means is this. He lists 16 qualities, okay, and says these are the 16. And what are that? Gunavan, who in this world right now? Okay, so this actually talks about the fact that Valmiki was contemporary of Rama. Okay, so he says Sampratam Loke, that means not something that happened, several yugas ago. Right now, is there somebody in the world, okay, who is Gunavan, who is endowed with excellent qualities, who is Viryavan, who is one with prowess or valor, and who is Dharmagya, who has the absolute knowledge of what is Dharma, who is Kritagya, who is very grateful for what somebody has actually done to him, who is Satyavak, whoever speaks the truth, who is Dృఢవ్రతः. So that means who takes a vow and he stays firm in that vow. Who is endowed with an excellent charitra or character, okay, and who is Sarvabhuta Hite Rataha. That means who is ever engaged in the welfare of all beings, not just humans, not just this or that. Of every single being, he is always engaged in he is a benefactor of all beings. Who is a Vidwan, who is a scholar actually, and who is Samartha, who is capable of doing a lot of things. And on top of that, who is Eka Priyadarshana, who is the one whose sight actually fills everyone with a lot of joy. And then who is Atmavan, who is actually and on top of having valor and all this, who is Atmavan? That means he's actually self-restrained. Okay. So, and who is Jitakrodha, who has conquered his anger. Okay, he doesn't get angry simply because he has the might at his disposal. And he is one who has actually won over the anger. And who is Jyotiman, who is effulgent, and who is Anasuyakaha. He has absolutely no jealousy. Okay. And finally, Kasya Bibhyati Devascha Jata Roshasya Sanyage. Now, if this man gets angry, even gods will fear his anger. Okay, and they will in battle. He will he will actually defeat the gods also. Okay? Even the gods will actually be afraid to face him in the battle. So, who in the world right now is actually a person who has all these qualities? He actually talks about 16 qualities here, and he lists out. And Narada, obviously, he chuckles. Okay, he says, "Oh, excellent! You have asked a good question, because this man has, he has traveled the worlds, not just this our Earth. He has traveled the worlds. So therefore, and he obviously knows, there is somebody like that. He actually talks about Rama. And not because if Valmiki asks him about 3 verses, Narada lists out 10 verses. He actually lists out almost 32 qualities of Rama, and then he says that briefly, I will just read it out here. He is intelligent, adheres to righteous conduct, is articulate, auspicious, and a tormentor of enemies. He has broad shoulders and chest, is strong and long armed, the wielder of the mighty bow, has a broad forehead and a head with noble qualities, is valiant and a conqueror of the foe. He has a well proportioned and lustrous body shining in complexion and is full of auspiciousness. He is righteous, truthful, and is always concerned about the welfare of people. Rama is renowned, wise, pure, obedient, and equanimous. He is like Lord Brahma and is a sustainer of the worlds, protecting his subjects as well as the moral code in the society. He is endowed with an excellent memory and is well versed in Vedas, scriptures, as well as the science of archery. He is talented, dear to all, unperturbed, courteous, and blessed with discrimination of good and bad. Just the way the sea is accessible to the rivers, he is accessible to all who are virtuous. He has a delightful countenance and is equally disposed to all. So that's what actually it to me it appears that Narada was just waiting for somebody to ask this question in order to sing the glory of Rama in such detail. And Narada actually goes on in about 100 verses. He sings the glory of Rama, and he tells the brief story of Rama as to what happened in his time and what will happen for. As we are talking about, we are currently in Rama's time. So, and then what will happen? How long he will rule? So he actually says that. So therefore, Valmiki takes note of this particular brief story, and he actually is constantly ruminating on that. That's when Lord Brahma walks into his hermitage, and he actually blesses him with a vision to divine exactly as the story happened. And he also, by the blessings of Goddess Saraswati, he gives him the wherewithal to the poetic wherewithal to actually pen it in a beautiful way. So that is how the epic is actually structured, and then it just doesn't end with how Valmiki wrote that. Then yeah, okay. This point, I must say this. Why did we talk about the 16 qualities of that Valmiki inquired and a lot of qualities that Narada actually responded with? Because the entire Valmiki Ramayana, I think, is an elaboration and exemplification of these values at various times in Rama's life. So, therefore, I think this particular, the first sarga, which is the executive summary, is the soul of this whole Ramayana and rightly known as the Sankshiprta Ramayana. So, therefore, it is not a simple story of a prince who got exiled and he went through troubles and all that. It's actually much more beyond that. There is a lot more that actually connects with people. So, and then Maharshi, once he got the go ahead from Brahma and he actually wrote it, writing the epic is one thing, and in non YouTube, that's what you do to actually propagate this. So he found Lava and Kucha who they lived in his ashram actually because Mother Sita was with Valmiki at that time. So he actually trained them to sing the glory of Rama. And these two brothers, they were actually singing around in the streets of Ayodhya, and they were so beautifully singing that it actually horrified everyone who were actually listening to that. They all went into raptures. So that's when Rama happened to pass by one fine day pass by such a performance that was going on by these two brothers. He didn't know that they were actually his sons, and he also liked their singing a lot. And he said, "Hey boys, why don't you come on to me and why don't you come to my palace? You just sing for us." And he actually summons all his brothers and ministers and says, listen to these boys, they're singing so beautifully. So from there on, Lava and Kusha, they sing the entire glory of Ramayana. And from there on, it's actually like a flashback. So therefore, the Ramayana part is always like Lava and Kusha singing the whole song in front of Ramayana, Rama. So therefore, it has that stamp of approval because Rama himself listened and probably nodded his head in approval. So therefore, that's how Valmiki actually talks about how he propagated this epic in the world. And he actually says, because to touch upon the Purusharthas, he says the epic is Kamartha Guna Sanyuktam Dharmartha Guna Vistaram Samudramiva Ratnadhyam Sarvashruti Manoharam. The epic delves into innumerable aspects of the pursuit of dharma, artha, and kama, and it is filled with the gems like an ocean and flowing like sweet music to everyone's ears. So that probably tells us about the epic longevity of this epic. Therefore, let's move on to the other value that we talked about, where we find a glorious guru and a great sishyas. So as I mentioned earlier, the most of the Balakandam is not about Rama's childhood. In fact, Rama is born in the 18th Sarga of the Balakandam, and within 10 slokas, Rama attains a marriageable age, which is possibly about 12 years, 13 years at that time. So within 10 slokas, so Maharshi doesn't waste any time in trying to talk about the childhood pranks or what happened or what didn't happen. In fact, immediately in about 13 slokas, Dasharatha is thinking that these boys have now learned a lot of things, and I should actually marry them off. And then enters Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra actually takes Rama and Lakshmana along with him for to protect his yajna. And on the way, after Rama kills Tataka, upon the recommendation of Indra, Vishwamitra gives him about 40 types of weapons to Rama. And after receiving all the 40 types of astras, listen to what Rama is saying. He actually says, Grihitastro'smi Bhagavan Duradharsha Surasureihi Astranam Tvahamichami Samharam Munipungava. He says, by receiving these astras, I become, O Maharshi, here with a power that cannot be challenged even by the Devas. So, oh, best among the Munis, I would now like to know how to restrain and withdraw them, because that actually talks about Rama's responsibility in handling these weapons. Because it is very easy to have a weapon in the wrong hands and then see the extinction of humanity. So, therefore, as a very responsible young man, if we will, he actually asked Vishwamitra this question. Kindly advise me about. Of course, the sage would have given him even otherwise, but Rama himself actually extremely humbly he submits to the guru that he would like to know the way to withdraw these weapons also once they have been actually launched. So therefore, I think he is the rightful possessor of those weapons, and I think it talks a lot about a glorious guru and the great sishyas. And we have, I'm sure, our land has seen innumerable instances which are replications of. Then let's talk a bit about Vishwamitra's tenacity. Okay? Vishwamitra, to begin with, he was actually a king. He is actually known as Kushika. And once he actually happens to, in his conquests, he goes around the world, goes around the land, and he happens to visit the ashram of Brahmarshi Vasishtha. So there what happens, Vasishtha actually treats him and his entire retinue, the large army contingent that came with him, with a sumptuous feast. And who sponsored that sumptuous feast is actually his divine cow by name Nandini. Shabala. Sorry. So Shabala actually then Vishwamitra Kushika then he actually wants this Shabala with him because the king should possess the best of everything. So therefore he tells Vasishtha that I will give you anything you want. You ask for it, I will give you. You give me this divine cow. And then Vasishtha says, no way, because my entire life is very closely connected with her, so therefore I cannot give. And then Vishwamitra, the Kushika actually launches an offensive, and which the cow actually generates an army that promises the entire army of Vishwamitra, and it actually rallies them. Then Vishwamitra is actually stunned. Okay, oh my God, I have so many weapons, and he actually goes and gets more weapons from Lord Shiva, which he subsequently gives to Rama. Hmm, like we spoke in the last slide. He actually says, I have so many weapons, and yet I have actually lost to this particular Brahmin who just has his Brahmadanda. He's a Brahmarshi because he has that effulgence around with him, which could actually defeat anything. So therefore, he actually makes up his mind that he should actually go and become a Brahmarshi himself. And you see, this figure here actually talks to you about how it was not a smooth journey for Vishwamitra, how he actually went and first he actually got the Divyastras, and having spent the Divyastras from Shiva, he went down. It is much like that snakes and ladders game that actually happened to him. But he kept going up. He kept inching up every single time, but it was not a very small journey. And then he became Rajarshi, and then, there came a king by name Trishanku who wanted a certain favor, and having done that to him, he actually slid further. Then he continued his penance, he became a rishi. Then somebody by name Chunashepa came for a favor, and he had to expend some of his merit, and then again he goes down. Then he climbed again. Then Menaka, the celestial damsel, actually came to disturb his penance, and he slid again, and he did it again, and he became a Maharshi, and then he tried to actually curtail his senses. He became an Indriya Nigrahi, and then the other celestial damsel Rambha came to disturb him. He became very angry, and he lost a little bit of his merit. And again, he actually performed extremely hard penance. And after having done this Ghora Tapa, what happens is Lord Brahma himself comes, recommended by all the gods, saying, please give him what he wants, because if you don't give him what he wants, the world will become full of atheists, because somebody who is struggling so hard and who is so single, one-pointed effort he's actually doing to get this, and he's doing everything that is needed to do this. So if he doesn't get that, the world will become full of atheists. So then Brahma actually comes and says, we are very pleased with your tapa, O son of Kushika. You have attained Brahmatva with your intense tapa. So he actually welcomes Brahmarshi Vishwamitra. So the sage Vishwamitra's unrelenting penance actually yields him this title, so which is actually the highest among the sages. So I think this is a great lesson that comes about tenaciously actually pursuing one's effort, no matter how many distractions are there. One should never actually lose the sight of their goal. Then it is actually exemplary. Then we come to the second kandam, the Ayodhya kandam, where we talk about the righteous ruler and the connected citizens. In fact, as I already mentioned, I am actually taking glimpses of it there and there. It's not a continuous narration of the epic, although it is continuous in the sense of the that we are following the kandas one by one, but we are not covering all the episodes. I am just picking on some of them which reflect these values, but they are not the only ones. So then, after Rama is actually married to Sita, they stay in Ayodhya for a period of 13 years. So, a lot of the popular perception, the ignorant perception is that Rama married Sita, came, and the next day they actually left to the forest. No, they actually lived there for 13 years, and in these 13 years, Rama actually assisted his father Dasharatha in a various ways in actually administering the kingdom. Okay, so therefore, after 13 years, Dasharatha also realizes he is actually becoming old. He doesn't look very old in this picture, but by Maharshi says he's about 60,000 years old by then. And he calls up the council of the feudatory kings, the eminent citizens, his ministers, and all that, and he says, Anujato himam sarvaihi, Gunay Jeshto mamatmajaha, Purandara samovirye, Rama parapuranjaya. So he says, there is now a question of succession that is actually coming. And my eldest son Rama, who is a conqueror of enemy cities and who is equal in prowess to Indra, and he has the best of qualities, and he actually has taken after me. So therefore, what I want to do is that Tan Chandramiva Pushyena Nittam Dharmabhrataamaram Yuvaraje Niyokrasmi Pritah Purusha. Therefore, it is my pleasure to crown him the best among men, the best among upholders of Dharma, and glowing like moon in conjunction with the star Pushyami as my he referent. And having said this, see, Dasharatha was an unquestionable emperor, so nobody could actually overrule him. But you see what he says is यद्यप्येषा मम प्रीतिः हितमन्यद्विचिन्त्यताम् अन्या मध्यस्थचिन्ता हि विमर्दाभ्य विकोदया. So he says, even though this is what I would like, may you please think of all possible good alternatives. Impartial considerations that are deliberated well would only yield the best results. So this actually talks us, in this world today, the epithet of oldest democracy rests on some other country. But I think this country, in several janapadas, actually, we can't say this happened in every single janapada, but in Ayodhya for sure, because Dasharatha is saying he's actually asking his council, okay, who are the feudatory kings and all that, and he's asking them as to what their opinion is, and if they have a different opinion than what he has, so that we can have a discussion. So it actually pinpoints that debate and discussion were always a part of our society, and they should continue to be so. And of course, then the story follows that the citizens actually sing his glory, and he says, Dasharatha, you are actually doing exactly the right thing. They all love Rama, and therefore you should crown him as the king. And of course, Dasharatha announces that. And just the night before, which was actually the next day, he was to be coronated. And the next day, and that night, actually, Kaikeyi, the second queen, the youngest queen of Dasharatha, actually has her two bones. I'm sure everybody knows about that. And she says that Rama should go to exile for a period of 14 years and Bharata should rule the world for those 14 years. So therefore, Dasharatha is devastated when he hears that. So and Rama is summoned to the presence of Dasharatha and Kaikeyi. And listen what he says here. Rama tells Kaikeyi, Tad bruhi vachanam devi, ragyam yadabhikankshitam, karishye pratijane cha, Rama bhashate. He says, Rama does not speak two voices. Okay, he doesn't, he says one thing and he actually follows that. Okay, so therefore, my father Dasharatha is not able to tell me something. You tell me. You tell me whatever he wants and I will do that. Okay. So, and of course, then Kaikeyi tells him that you got to go to the forest for a period of 14 years and Bharata should rule the kingdom. And he happily agrees. Okay, it's not that he wanted to go to the forest, but he said that if my father has given that word to you, he has given you that boon, it should be upheld by all costs by me. Okay, so therefore, no cost is too high to uphold the truth. So therefore, Rama gives her the word that, yeah, I shall go to the forest right away. I will take the permission of my mother Kausalya and I will tell Sita. And he actually came out of that chamber. And as he came out of the chamber, Maharshi writes, इतीव तस्यां परुषं वदन्त्यां चैव रामः प्रविवेश शोकं प्रविव्यथे चापि महानुभावो राजा तु पुत्रप्यसनामितप्तः. He says, such terrible words uttered by her could not make Rama succumb to any sort of grief. So what Maharshi says about Atmavan is actually established in himself. Okay? What we talked about in the first sarga. But the noble king actually suffered a lot because he was affectionate towards his son. So therefore, this shows about Rama's quality of Sthita Prajnata that again comes in Bhagavad Gita. So the Sthita Prajnata, whether it is the because coronation of as the key referent of Ayodhya is no small thing, and it came and then it actually went off equally quickly. So therefore, but he actually did not think twice. Okay, he says he won't utter two words about it, and he actually stuck to his word. So therefore, he's teaching us here that no cost is actually too high to uphold the truth. Then the beautiful thing that actually comes in the Ayodhya canon is the fraternal love among the four brothers. So as I mentioned earlier, the tale of brotherhood that actually Ramayana teaches is actually exemplary. Okay, so therefore, Ayodhya Kandam makes this point to actually bring it up in 70 mm, if you will, okay, in the big screen actually. So some examples of that I give here. Because Lakshmana is livid that Rama agreed to go to the forest. He says, I will actually stage a coup. I will kill anybody who comes in the way of your coronation, and you just announce yourself as the heir apparent. But having said that, Lakshmana tells Kausalya this. He says, Deeptam Agni Maranyam va iti Ramah Pravekshyati. Tam Tatra Man Devi Tam Purvam Avadharya. Oh, be assured, Mother Kausalya, I will be there ahead of Rama, whether he goes to the Vana or jumps into the blazing fire. Okay? He leaves the decision to Rama. He tells him that he would like to, go and kill around everyone to ensure that he is the heir apparent. But he says that if at all he wishes otherwise, I'll be there before him. So that's the amount of brotherly love and commitment he had towards actually Rama. Then, of course, Rama does not budge. He goes ahead to the forest, and Dasharatha loses his life. And Bharata actually is summoned back. Incidentally, Bharata is not at Ayodhya when all this is happening. Bharata is elsewhere in his maternal grandfather's house. So when Bharata actually comes back, Kaikeyi breaks this news to him. He actually asks, "Where is Dasharatha?" And she says, "Dasharatha has gone to where everybody finally goes." So those are exactly Maharshi's words. So that's the type of that's how much she took it for granted. So and then he says, okay, what happened to Rama? Then he said, no, Rama is exiled, and then she tells him everything. Okay, then he just lambasts her. Okay, he poo-poos her in no uncertain words, and he actually tells her that dukhe me dukkhamakaro prane ksharam ivadatha rajanam preta bhavastam krutva ramancha tapasam. You added grief to grief. I am already grieving that my father is dead. And on top of that, by saying that you have sent Rama away to the forest, you have actually added further grief. And you know how it sounds? The wound is already bleeding, and you have actually added salt to the wound. So this is actually a beautiful prayoga here, Prane Kshara Vivadadhaha, meaning adding salt to the wound, which we use even in contemporary days. It appears, perhaps the first prayoga happened in Ramayana. So it's a Ramayana prayogam, we can say. So Bharata actually says that you have added salt to my wound. So somebody who actually got the entire kingdom of Ayodhya without doing any effort for it, he actually says, "What did you do?" And he actually is not even thinking twice to actually quitting to disowning his own mother. So and then Bharata says, "No way, I will actually." And then Bharata further says, Kulasyatvam abhavaya Kalaratra rivagataha Angaram upaguhyasma pitame nava buddhavan. So what he says is, you came like the night of dissolution to our family and for the annihilation of this family. And my father actually hugged you, not quite realizing that he's actually hugging burning coal. Okay, and he didn't know what he was doing. So I don't think there has to be a greater condemnation of his mother than this to actually know exactly what he was going through at that point in time. So then, of course, Bharata goes to the forest to request Rama to come back, and he goes with a large contingent of army, which raises suspicion in a lot of people. It raises suspicion in Guha, the tribesman. It raises suspicion in Maharshi Bharadwaja. And finally, Lakshmana is extremely livid that they have been banished to the forest, but he actually climbs a tall tree and he sees who is coming, and he identifies that it is Bharata whose army is coming, and then he just says, "I will actually, right now, I will vanquish all of them." And because what do they think? They won't let us live in peace even here. So when he says that, Rama actually calms Lakshmana, and what he says is, "Yadvina bharatam tvancha shatrughnam chapi manata upenma sukham kinchit atmatat kurutan chiki." Oh Lakshmana, I don't want any comfort or any pleasure that my brothers don't enjoy. So therefore, even if I actually enjoy any comfort that my brothers don't enjoy, let that go to ashes. Okay, so this is a great statement, and Rama has lived by this statement because later in Yuddha Kandam, after the war, after the battle, Ravana is slain. Vibhishana tells, "Why don't you, nicely decorate yourself and go to Ayodhya?" He says, "No way, because my brother Bharata is there, and he's actually having left everything. He's pining for me. So I will go first. He should actually decorate himself, then I decorate myself." So that's the kind of commitment that Rama has. That's the kind of brotherhood all the four brothers have. And I think this is an excellent reminder for us to actually, inculcate this more and more in our lives. Then there is commitment and devotion. Because as I said, Guha actually has a suspicion that why Bharata is coming with such a large contingent. Actually, Bharata's idea was to crown Rama and bring him in all glory from the forest. He wanted to crown him right in the forest itself. That's the reason he went with such a large contingent. So this Guha, when he gets a suspicion, he goes to Bharata and he actually tells him, "Kachinna dushto vrajase ramasya krishna karmanaha. Yante mahati sena shankam janayati mame." He says, uh, your large army is actually raising a suspicion in me. Are you not going there with any evil intentions of causing any harm to Rama? So you see, Guha is after all a tribesman. He's a king of those tribes, and Bharata has such a large army at his disposal. But he didn't actually think twice before challenging him or taking him to his asking him as to what do you mean? Why are you going there like this? Okay, so I think that is actually his outstanding commitment and devotion to Rama, which actually made him say that. And of course, Bharata then breaks down and says, "No, no, I am actually going to fetch him back." And then, of course, Guha goes, accompanies Bharata. And actually, Bharata says, "Mabhutsa kalo yat kashtam namam shankitum arhasi ragavasya hime bhrata jyeshta pitussamo mama." So he says, "May that day never dawn that will see such a terrible thing happen. You shall not suspect me, for I look upon Raghava my elder brother as my father." So that is the same thing that actually Rama pretty much already into Bharata's heart what was actually going on, and he tells Lakshmana as much. But Bharata also, when he sent back from the forest to Ayodhya, he doesn't want to stay in Ayodhya. He actually dons the bark and the matted hair, just like Rama did, and to undergo the same difficulty that Rama is undergoing, he banished himself to the suburbs of Ayodhya to a place called Nandigrama. And what did he do there? Savalkala Jatadhari Nirveshadhara Prabhu Nandigrame Vasavira Sasenyo Bharatastada. He actually coronated the sandals of Rama on the Simhasanam, and he himself donned the barks and the matted hair. And whatever he did, he actually submitted to the sandals, and he actually had the bhavam that he was actually submitting that to Rama, and he actually carried out his day-to-day activities. So that's how committed and devoted Bharata was to Rama, because Rama was actually committed to Dharma. Then we come to the Aranyakandam, where Rama actually, gave word to protect the sages of the Dandaka. And when those sages actually came to, tell him that these demons are actually troubling them a lot. So Rama, without thinking twice, he assures protection to them. So when he assures protection, actually again we talk about the debate and discussion. Sita raises a red flag, saying, "Why are you doing this? Okay, now you're a kshatriya. Okay, I know that, but right now you are not here to fight any wars. You're here to live like an ascetic. So of what use is the bow to you now? Okay, so why should you have the bow now? Okay, and why should you go around perpetrating violence on these people who didn't do anything to you? Okay, so he actually says, she says, "Kwaja shastram, kwaja vanam, kwaja kshatram, tapak kwaja. Yavidham idamasmabhi, desha dharmastu pujitam." So you respect the law of the land. Okay, so you are here as an ascetic, so you be as an ascetic. Okay, leave aside the bow. Later, when you go to Ayodhya, then you can take out your bow and all that. So then Rama says, "Tadavashyam maya karyam krishinam paripalanam anuktenapi vaidehi pratigyayatu kim punaha." He says, "You know what? It is my my duty to actually protect those good people, those rishis who are actually, they're engaged in the welfare of mankind. So therefore, even without them asking, I should actually do it. I should be doing it. And what then to talk about if they have already asked me, then there is no question of going back. So this again talks about, there is no, it's not, she's not a submissive wife who just did anything that he said. Okay, but when the questions had to be raised, they actually had a beautiful discussion here. You should read these two, sargas in Aranyakandam where this discussion happens. And what he finally says is that Mama Snehacha Sauharda Idamuktam Swayanaghe Paritushtoshmiham Site Nahaya Nahyanichito Nushishyate. So he says, I am very happy about whatever you have told me out of love and affection. O blameless one, for no advice would ever be tendered to those who are not dear enough. So you see the kind of spirit he actually took it in. So then, of course, the Khara and Dushana and the 14,000 Surpanaka comes and her nose and ears are cut off because she has some amorous advances towards Rama and Lakshmana, and she actually tries to harm Sita. That's when these two actually, to protect her, they punish her, and she goes and brings it up to Khara and Dushana, who is the de facto ruler of the Janasthana or the Dandaka forests, and he comes with his 14,000 strong army and he gets vanquished in 72 minutes. So Rama actually puts aside Sita and Lakshmana, and he takes on all of them, and he makes short work of them, which enrages the demons. That's how Ravana is activated. He comes and he actually abducts Sita. So then Rama, with Sita abducted and goes to forest, Rama is he's actually devastated now. So that is when the role of actually Lakshmana comes, because he turns into a friend, a brother who is actually a friend. And Rama is actually in a pensive mood, he's crying all the time. In fact, Maharshi says he looks like a mad fellow. Okay, Unmatta iva lakshate, he says. So it's not that he has a protagonist and he wants to to make his picture bright all the time. He actually uses the right word. He says he became like a mad guy. So you look at this picture. So they have the overgrown birds and all that. Okay, so this is perhaps reflective of the sorrow that Rama had at that time. So that time Lakshmana is actually telling him, "Utsaho balavan arya, nastyutsahat param balam." Sotsahasya lokesmin akinchidapi durlabham. He says, "Oh noble one Rama, motivation is strength. Utsaha, enthusiasm. You should have enthusiasm to achieve something. There is no strength better than motivation. Okay, for one who is motivated, nothing is impossible in the world." So I think that's a wonderful lesson, because it's not as if Rama doesn't know this, right? Because he is fully aware of this. But at that time, when he is pensive and and he is not able to do that, to have Lakshmana by his side, who like a friend is actually telling him, and he actually tells him that a motivated person will not wilt under the weight of the tasks, because if you have enthusiasm, with motivation alone, we can actually recover Janaki. So that's a beautiful. In fact, this slokam was narrated by Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji before the Corona. I remember those days when Utsaha Balavan Arya. So don't go into a gloom. Okay, so let's be positive about it. With enthusiasm, let's actually face this particular situation. So therefore, the reason I actually recounted that is that's the kind of inspiration that this particular episode gives us. So then, of course, Rama and Lakshmana, they walk to the where the Pampa Sarovar, and where Sugriva actually spots them from a distance, and he's actually terrified, taking them for the men of Vali who have come to assassinate him. So he actually sends Hanuman in disguise to Rama and Lakshmana to find out who they are, and if they are favorable towards them, he could actually have a deal with them. He could actually do the friendship with them. So Hanuman actually goes and he extols Rama and Lakshmana in many different words. Hanuman goes in the guise of an ascetic. He actually not as a monkey, but he says, "Himantau Rupa Sampannau Vrishabha Shrestha Vikramau Asti hastopam bhujau, jutimanto narashabho. So he uses the Dvivachanam here. He says, you look like the best among the men. Bull is actually, Vrkshabha is the Shrestha. It is depicted to be, to actually say something is the best among men. So bull among men means that you are the best among the men. Radiant, rich, handsome, and your arms are strong like the trunks of an elephant, and you have the gait of a great bull. So we know how the bull actually it bosses around like it owns the whole place. So you guys are walking like that. So after hearing the explanation of Hanuman, and he speaks for quite some time, but Rama and Lakshmana don't immediately respond. They're just listening to him. And Rama tells Lakshmana, hey, Lakshmana, listen, look at this guy. Okay, someone na Rigveda Vinitasya, na Yajurveda Dharinaha, na Samaveda Vidushaha, Shakyamevam Vibhashatam. It is not possible to speak immaculately like this for someone who is not well trained in Rigveda, who does not have Yajurveda by heart, and who is not proficient in reciting the Samaveda, who doesn't know Vyakaranam. And because he spoke so much, because when we speak a lot, like I'm doing now, it's obvious that we will make a lot of mistakes and we'll go back and correct whom, we'll hum and ha. But he's not doing any of that, right? So therefore, it is not possible for someone who is not extremely, well educated scholar and who's a practitioner of all that scholarly things that he has actually studied. So it's not so. Rama actually instantly identifies Hanuman and his great qualities, and of course he tells Lakshmana, if this kind of a minister is there, as he says, he is a minister of Sugriva, then with this kind of a minister, we can actually achieve what the king can achieve what he wants. So then Hanuman takes him to Sugriva, and what Sugriva tells him, they kind of get introduced to each other through Hanuman. So Sugriva tells him, okay, we are men in the same boat. I have lost my wife, you have lost your wife. So therefore, we should be friends because we both fight by dharma. So Sugriva tells him, Bhagate yadiva sakyam vapurecha prasaritaha grihyatam panina pani maryada madhyatam says, if you like my friendship, may you hold my stretched hand. He actually gives his stretched hand and he says, let's shake hands. So, and let's be bound in a gentleman's agreement to actually honor each other's commitments. So that's how the friendship of Sugriva happens. And Sugriva is a Chandasashana. By that we mean that what he tells must happen. Okay, if it doesn't happen, he doesn't take it very kindly. Okay, so Sugriva actually, in fact, that's something we find today also. They say Sugrivagya. Okay, it was a usage that what he says is Sugrivagya. That means if you don't do that, you're done. Okay, so even now in Karnataka, the government orders are known as Sugriva Sasana. Okay, so therefore you see that's how much I'm bringing up these things to just to tell you how much Ramayana is part of us. Okay, so. Therefore, that's what this slokam says. Tadugra shasanam hartu vikyaya haripungavaha shalabhaya sancharya medinim sampradasthire. So, as Sugriva commanded the crores of Vanars he had, and he told them, you go east and you will find this. You go south, you will find this. You go west, you will find this. You go north, you will find this. See, actually, as I told earlier, Sugriva's Atlas, there is a beautiful YouTube video. Please do find it. Is again from Sri Nilesh, who does excellent research in this area. So, hearing Sugriva's command, immediately they all dispersed like the moths all over the world. So that's how Sugriva actually carried out his friendship, and the search party with Hanuman and others, they actually went in the southern direction, and they finally happened to find him. And this is where Hanuman actually displays. We are in the Sundarakanda now. Excellent courage and clarity of thought, where Hanuman actually says before he takes off, he says, Ramartham Vanarartham Chekisham Karmadushkaram Samudrasya Paramparam Dushkabam Praptumitsati. So Maharshi says, so he is going there for the sake of Rama and for the sake of Vanaras. So he's actually a team player, basically, okay, who is working on this particular goal, and he wishes to reach the other side of the ocean, which is very hard to do otherwise. And of course, Hanuman goes and he searches around. He doesn't find Sita, as I told earlier. He's a lonely seeker. So he gets extremely upset that he's not able to find, he doesn't know what to do. And momentarily he finds Mandodari and he actually becomes, he thinks she is Sita. Immediately, what does he do? He actually dances in celebration. Okay, he's a monkey, right? The small monkey, he took a small form. He immediately climbs the pillar and slides from the pillar. And how monkeys do, they actually, kiss their tail when they are very happy. So Hanuman does that, and that's exactly what Valmiki writes here. Again, I wanted to bring this up because it's not that he wants to make the picture of the protagonist very bright. He actually, is giving us a factual narration of what's going on. So again, of course, let me skip some of this in the interest of time. But what Hanuman, after getting upset, what he actually tells himself is that Anirveda Shriyo Moolam, Anirveda Param Sukham, Anirvedo hi Satam, Sarvartheshu Pravartakaha, Karoti Sapalam Janto, Karmayat Karoti Sa. That what it means is that keeping the gloomy spirits at bay is essential for prosperity and critical for happiness. So therefore, whenever we are gloomy, we need to just remind ourselves that no, I should not be gloomy. Okay, and it connects very well with the Utsaha Valvanarya that we actually spoke about in the previous one, and it is needed to carry out an affair at any time. So Anirvedam is what actually matters. So it will bring success to any endeavor that a man takes on. So that's what actually Hanuman tells himself, and that's how he pulls himself out of the desperation, and he is able to go further in his mission. So then, of course, he finds Sita, and the way he actually thinks, the way he actually comes out of desperation is that because I have supreme might, if it so happens I'm not able to find her, I will go attack Ravana frontally, just take him with him and drop him under the at the feet of Rama. It says, tell him where Sita is. Okay, so because when he thinks about that kind of a possibility, he gets more mental space to actually go and find her. So that is the courage and clarity of thought that Hanuman actually represents in this Sundarakandam through and through. And once Sita actually sees him, Sita is at the verge of committing suicide at that time because she doesn't have anything, any astra or any weapon to actually hurt herself. So she wanted to hang herself in the branch with her long braid of hair. So she actually just tries to do that when Hanuman spots her, and then once she hears the glory of Rama from him, she actually tells him that, oh, that adage that says it might take over 100 years, but just hang on. If you hang on, you will hear good news. So there is a Kalyani Patagathayam Laukiki Patagadha. There was a saying even back in those days that, hey, guys, just hang on. Don't do anything to hurt yourself. Just hang on, and you will hear good news. So that's exactly what she is actually talking about here. So therefore, I think that today, with so many people having psychological problems, okay, so this is an excellent thing to actually remember. And if we read things like this, we will be reminded of things like this when, because everybody goes through some desperate times. And in those desperate times, we need to pull ourselves up and run again. So I think these are excellent pointers towards that. And Hanuman actually thinks, after ensuring her that they will come soon, he says, "Alpaseshamidam karyam nishtayam asitekshana, three upayana tikramya chaturtha yadrishite." So there are four upayas that for conflict resolution, what people say, what are given in the Shastras, the Sama, Dana, Bheda, and Danda. First one is the Sama, just have discussion, try to reason out. Second is Dana, where you try to, give something in return so that the conflict is resolved. Then Bheda, try to create a difference between, if there are two people, try to create a difference and then hit into the enemy camp. The fourth one is Danda, it's a frontal war. So, three Nupaya Natikramya. So, Hanuman thinks that with Ravana, I cannot have Sama, Dana, Bheda. I need to have the Dandapayam, and he actually launches an attack in the Ashokavana. So therefore, he kills a lot of demons, and that's all. Of course, we know he comes back successfully from the from Lanka back to Rama. And then what does Rama do? Rama actually says that one who is assigned a task that is next to impossible to accomplish by his master, he does it with zeal and interest and does something more. He is said to be the best among men, okay, best among the spirited beings. And one who is capable and intelligent, but he does not stretch himself to do a bit more than what is actually asked for, and he just pleases the and please the king. Is actually he met expectation, mediocre man, and who actually has been assigned a particular task, but he actually doesn't do that he doesn't listen with full attention, or he doesn't do it with full attention. He's set among the worst of the men. Now, what does this remind of you? Remind you of in corporate world today we see exceeded expectation, meet expectation, and below expectation. So that's what it is actually very clearly laid out, and this has been a part of the folklore for a long time. Okay. So then, of course, the story of the of Vibhishana comes because Rama and all the entire Vanara army actually goes to fight Ravana. They build a big bridge, and they are about to build a big bridge. They have reached the shores of the ocean. So that is when Vibhishana tries to see reason with Ravana. He says, Ravana, don't do this. Okay, I have heard of Rama's valor, so you don't do this, because if you do this, you will definitely have to, not only you, because you are a king, all of us need to actually pay a price for this. So then Ravana doesn't like it. Nobody in the court likes that. They are all yes men. So Ravana actually makes fun of him. He says, we do not have fear from fire or weapons or nose. The only ones we dread are our terrible and selfish siblings and cousins. Okay? So you see how much these are all human psychologies which have been actually put. We don't fear the fire or anything else, but we fear our cousins and siblings, is what he says. And in so many of property disputes, we do see this these days, right? So then Vibhishana tells him, no, no, no. Sulabha Purusha Rajan Satatam Priyavadinaha. Apriyasya Supathyasya Akash Lotasya Durlabha. So he says, oh king, it's actually easy to find people who talk sweetly, who nod to you. But when it comes to the bitter truths, neither the speaker nor the hearer will be around. Okay, so therefore nobody would be willing to listen. So that's what he says, and he goes to find refuge in Rama. So Vibhishana gives up. Okay, there is no matter how so intimate Ravana was doing in Adharma, so he actually gave him up and he went to the feet of Rama. So and then again a discussion ensues in Rama's darbar saying, okay, whether it is the right thing to give him refuge or not. And then he actually Rama says, so dushto vapya dushto va kimesha rajanicharaha Sukshmamapya hitam kartum mama shakta kanchana. So he may be a good or bad guy, but what can he do to me? So that is the amount of confidence Rama has in his own abilities. So, but he didn't give him refuse because of his abilities, but it is purely out of dharma. Somebody should read, you should go and read the 18th Sarga of Yuddha Kandam to actually know that he didn't do it as a pain. Actually, he did it for dharma. And Rama says, what is the dharma? He says, Sakadeva Prapannaya Tavasmiti Chayachate, Vayam Sarvabhutebhyo Dadami Yatadrutamama. He says, if one seeks refuge by saying, I am yours, once and for all, and he says, I free him from fear of every force and creature, and that is my vow. So that's what Rama's vow is, and this is an extremely important sloka that underlines the spirit of Ramayana and Rama. And of course, Rama says, even if Ravana himself comes on his own, I will give him refuge if he seeks. Okay? So therefore, that is how one actually upholds dharma. And there are few more instances of how dharma is actually upheld. Because after Ravana is killed, Vibhishana refuses to cremate him, saying, "Oh, he was such a bad guy, and he was a womanizer. So I will actually get bad if I actually cremate him." But Rama says nothing to it. Maranantani vairani nivrittam prayojanam. Kriyatamasya sanskaro mamapyasha yathadava. He is to me as he is to you. But once he is dead, all those matters, the outstanding matters actually are over. So you should do what your duty is next. So this was the kind of spirit which we always followed. So then Hanuman goes to Sita to convey the news of Rama's victory, and he tells Sita, oh mother, please give me this particular opportunity. All these demons around you who are horrible, terrifying fellows, and they told bad things to you. They actually try to scare you into submission. If you permit me, I shall vanquish them. Okay, and then you know what she says? She actually says, "How could one be angry, O best of wanderers, with these women who are under the protection and control of the king, and are simply carrying out the orders of others, being obedient servants they are." So she is very well. She sees even in the middle of the impossible trouble that she went through, the impossible torture that she went through. She knows that they are actually not doing it of their own volition, but as a part of their job, okay, as part of their master's order. So therefore, she says, no, spare them. Okay, so that's how they all have dharma. And finally, we come to the Ramarajya and how Ramarajya was. So because Rama goes back and he is coronated along with Sita, and in that Ramarajya, what happens is Sarvam Muditamevasit, Sarvam Dharmaparo Bhavat, Ramamevanu Pashyanto, Rabhyam Parasparam. Seeing such a Lord who espoused so many values and he looked after them well. Everybody looked at him and they didn't trouble each other. Okay? And on top of that, they actually told his stories. Okay, Rama is like this, Rama is like that. Ramo Rama iti prajanam ahvan kathaha. Rama bhutam jagadabhut. Rame rajyam prashasti. So while Rama ruled, actually everyone just talked about his rule, his stories, and they all actually, I mean, the entire world was actually full of Rama. And then finally, Maharshi says, शृणोति य इदं कार्यं पुरा वाल्मीकिना कृतं तत्त्वधानो जितक्रोधो दुर्गान्यति किसौ. So he says, whosoever with complete control over his emotions and with utmost devotion hears this poem, that is the Ramayana, which was penned by Valmiki in the days of the year, will overcome the trials and tribulations of life. So I wanted to include this because that has the message, because we all spoke about the Ramakatha now, as told by Valmiki, and this is how it has been actually depicted by him in such a true to life form, okay, and such an intimate form that you read it, you feel that you are actually in that. So I have some observations to actually complete the talk in a few minutes, in a couple of minutes actually. So Ramayana espouses the eternal values of the Sanatana Dharma. Through examples, it demonstrates the path which has to be trodden, and it's an evergreen storyline. And I can say this: Bharat is obsessed with the values of Rama, and Ramayana lives because of the love of the populace for the ideals of Rama, commitment of Sita, devotion of Lakshmana and Bharata, service and valor of Hanuman, friendship of Sugriva, and the belief of the Vanara army in the Ramakarya. So it still inspires generation after generation after generation, giving the message of how to be extremely capable and supremely humble and devoted at the same time. So, because the moment we see in the world today, the moment somebody has some riches or some might, they actually, you see a lot of attitude. Okay, but one can be supremely mighty and still extremely humble and very rooted all at the same time. So what if we lose it? We lose a roadmap for happy life, as simple as that. And can we lose it? Okay, so can we lose it is an important question. Yes, we can if we don't actually put efforts to. So losing it is actually not losing the story as such, because we will all of us know Ramayana in some form of the other. May not be in great detail, but we know the highlights of what happened. Okay, but the nuances we might lose if we don't pay attention to a particular thing, and that's what I'm coming to here. So I just want to say that the epics of our land, Bharat, have documented every possible situation that human beings and relations can face, and from the Purushartha's perspective, and therefore they actually offer us what is to be done in those cases. Okay, what is the precedent? How X and Y actually navigated those waters and how they went forward. And so, therefore, that is actually an excellent lesson, because nobody should think he is alone facing this. There have been instances like this. So, actually, as we read more and more, definitely we come to know about what was how this was navigated before, and then we get further ideas. So our Indic languages, because language is the most important thing, they contain the finer nuances about how to understand these. The examples of so here I have an example of this Sarvadamana. Okay, this is actually a beautiful story that was told by His Holiness Mahasannidhanam of the Sringeri Matha while speaking about the importance of Sanskritam. He exemplified through Kalidasa's Abhijnana Shakuntalam this particular instance where this Sarvadamana, who is the son of Dushyanta and Shakuntala, due to some reasons, he is actually he lives in the ashram of his Kanva Maharshi, and there what happens? He's playing. This fellow is so brave and mighty. He's playing with all the lions around him. You see that he actually says that he tells the lion, "Open your mouth. I want to count how many teeth you have." So that's the kind of thing he has. So the maid, just to make him a little bit more sattvic and all that, she brings a particular toy bird, and she tells him, "Shakunta lavanyam pasya vatsa." Shakunta lavanyam pasya vatsa. That is the word she says. So Shakunta is the bird, Lavanyam is the beauty, pasya vatsa. Oh my dear, look at the beauty of this particular word. Shakunta lavanyam pasya vatsa. Shakunta is one word, Lavanyam is a different word. Pasya vatsa. So this boy who says Shakuntalavanyam, he hears it as Shakuntala because it is his mother's name. He knows that. The boy hears Shakuntala and he says, "Oh, Mama Mata, where is my mother?" Because he hears Shakuntala and he asks, "Where is my mother?" So now you see, I probably explained it for 2 minutes in English, but in Sanskritam it is actually Shakuntalavanyam Pasyavatsa Mama Mata. So this is how brief it is. So how can you possibly, this is a small example of what we can lose, what kind of nuances we will lose if we read translations. Okay, it is an irony that we are speaking in English today, and but I just wanted to say that it is extremely important for us to be actually um, uh, rooted to our languages. So we should actually begin with our Matrabhasha and make small steps to go towards Sanskritam, because as I said again, I will reiterate, such nuances will be brutally lost in translation, and with that the finer points and proper understanding of our manuscripts that we have, of our rich Vangmayam that we have. So therefore, the most important is actually to spend time in our Matrabhasha every day. We should take a pledge that at least half an hour or so we should actually devote to our culture. Okay, and our culture is best understood in our Matrabhasha, and therefore, of course, you wield English by all means. Nobody is saying no. Okay, you wield both. Nobody. Why there has to be a choice? We can wield both with equal aplomb, and therefore, that will actually help us more and more. So the proper understanding, so therefore, will actually lead to greater faith, because once we know the nuances, we get a proper understanding, and that will actually lead to a greater faith in our heritage, in our Sanatana values, and that will actually lead to conviction. And once we have the conviction, obviously, automatically the courage will come on its own. So therefore, Sanskrit holds the key to Sanskriti, the culture, and open the treasure troves of the unadulterated wisdom by actually taking this particular key. This key is very easily accessible these days. The Sanskrita Bharati has been doing excellent work to actually propagate Sanskrit to almost everyone. They do it free of charge. They have so many resources on the internet. They actually do Sikshana Shibiras, where now post COVID there are a bunch of online classes where 10-day courses, 15-day courses, just to tell you about how Sanskrit can be learned in an easy way. So therefore, it's not easy, but with efforts, with the enthusiasm and unflinching commitment, if we do that, then definitely I think it actually opens up gateways of great wisdom to us. So with that, I have taken the material. Scores of these pictures are from the internet. I can't reference them here. I have taken the meanings and the slogans from readramayana.org, an excellent initiative. You should check this out, which has the entire Valmiki Ramayana until the Yuddha Kanda as a shloka and its meaning format. And ramabhaktisamrajyam.in, it's an English translation, a faithful English translation of Valmiki Ramayana that is done by yours truly. And of course, and the scores of the images from the internet, as I already mentioned. So with that, actually, thank you for your attention. Thanks for this opportunity, Swarohan, Narayananji, and Dinakar Kumarji. I am so blessed to actually be spending this time, recounting some of the glories of Ramayana, because they say Sthala Pulakanyayam. If you want to see if the rice has cooked, you don't touch every grain. If you actually touch there and there, you know that rice has cooked. So therefore, these few glimpses that I have actually shared, if they actually they give a glimpse of what the glory of Ramayana is, there is more and more for you to actually, for all of us to actually read and reflect and experience. So I'm accessible at this particular email, ramesh.sistla@gmail.com. Should you have any queries about how to get onto the Sanskrit highway, or how to get into Ramayana reading and all, feel free to write to me. I'll be happy to share whatever little experience I have or point you to appropriate. With that, thank you very much. Jai Shri Ram. स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्याय्येन मार्गेण महीं महिषाः ब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु जय श्रीराम
This was awesome. Wish time never ended. But yeah, unfortunately, some of these things do come to a stop. But you have provided a continuum for us to look at, the values from the Ramayana and implement it as well. So it was amazing. You brought in the historical perspective, you brought in the traditional perspective, you brought in the actual values perspective, complementary values, the Guru Shishya connection, and various other things, I think, which was very relevant, very interesting. And as you rightly put it, it is up for us to, with faith, implement that. I hope in the forthcoming sessions we can get real of drilled, a lot of drilled insights. Probably the Yoga Vasishta, and there are so many other things, right, within the Ramayana fold. And thank you so much. I don't think this could have come any better. It clearly shows the amount of knowledge and commitment you have towards this, and we are blessed that you could bring it out to us. So on behalf of Swarohan, the Swarohan team, Dinkar, and everyone else, I'd like to really thank you, and also on behalf of the audience who would have listened to this and who would be listening to this as well, because these are gems. So thank you so much for the elaborate, as at the same time very simplistic and straightforward coverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Narayananji. Apologies for shooting over, but once the flow starts, it is unstoppable.
Totally agree. I think that's not a problem at all. So thank you. Our blessing.